Welcome to another broadcast of YOUnique, Life Starring You on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. And now here she is. It's the lovely Susan Stackpole.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here on YOUnique, Life Starring You. We are what we are because of you, and we thank you so very much. We have a special project we do here at YOUnique called Pray It Forward, and studies show our internal environment affects our external world. And so we and our vibrations and thoughts and energy all have an effect. And so we just ask that during the moments and days and weeks ahead, that you just take some time and just take some deep cleansing breaths, allowing yourself just to be very present. Send yourself and the world around you loving thoughts. Do even the briefest meditation and say even the simplest prayers. And we believe that this blesses you and us and the entire world. And we thank you so much. We have an extra special guest here with us today who is really going to help us have a deeper understanding of priorities in our lives and empower us with some excellent financial tools. I'll share more about him and then we'll bring him in. His name is John W. Mallett, and he's an author, financial coach, housing industry expert, and more. His early childhood dwelling in the projects has fueled his determination, learning, and teaching people key financial stability strategies. John, during his multiple decades experience, has personally originated over $1 billion in home loans. His higher education includes a Brigham Young University undergraduate degree and a University of Southern California MBA. John's book, Buy Your First Home Today, is a comprehensive guide helping readers navigate today's hyper-competitive housing market. John's unique ability, simplifying financial awareness, empowers his clients discovering how home ownership can be a positively transformative life experience. Please, for more information, visit his website at John Mallett at JOHNWMALLETT.com. That's JOHNWMALLETT.com. John, thank you so much for your kindness in joining with us and just the excellent work that you're doing helping empower people. We're so grateful.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Susan. This is fantastic.
Well, it's absolutely mutual admiration. John. So thank you so much. John, for people who may just be meeting you, you're like so many of us. Your childhood experiences were very formative in terms of giving you drive and motivation for creating something very specific in your adult life. So could you please share with us how your childhood has motivated you, and especially if you have a specific experience like we all have where it was maybe a pivotal moment or an aha moment or something where you said, okay, this is really sparked your determination.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up very poor, grew up on welfare, and my father basically walked out on the family when I was about 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I was the youngest of a brother and two sisters. And at that time, it's like a rug being pulled out from under your feet. And so my mother decided that she needed to finish her education, so she moved. We lived in Santa Cruz, California. It was idyllic. We were, a block and a half from the beach, and it was a lovely home. And so when the separation or divorce happened, then my mother moved us to San Luis Obispo, California, where she could finish her college education. And from the ages of 8 until 14, we moved 4 times. And most of the time we were evicted or we couldn't make the payments on the rent. And, the last move that we had was actually into the projects, or to government housing, and that's where I spent most of my teenage years growing up. Then going back a couple of years, my mother was actually diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 12, and she died or transitioned when I was 18, complications from that. So it gave me it gave me an idea of the kind of lifestyle that I did want to have, but it also gave me a sensitivity as to what it's like to be in that kind of a situation. And it gave me to be able to sense, to say, wait a minute, this is not where I want to be. What can I do to make this better? And living in that environment, you learn a lot. And so it's formative. And what you said is exactly right. It's formative, and it laid pretty much the foundation of saying, wait a minute, this is not what I want in my life.
Wow. What do you feel like for you, John? Because for some people, that they would feel that was so overwhelming, and that's just the way that life is, and they wouldn't be able to construct a vision of a better future for themselves. What do you think it was in you, that exactly what you just said about that you had something in you that basically, so how can I create a better situation for myself?
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with our, with faith, and it had to do with, I always felt like it's a really good question you ask. I always felt like I was more of a visitor there. I never felt like I would be there permanently.
Wow.
And it was just a feeling that I had that there was a reason for me to be there, but that it wasn't going to be long term. And your question's a good one, because that is the nature of the work that I'm doing is helping people see something that they normally can't see. Mm-hmm. And I think that you really hit it on the head there, because that's a big part of being able to direct your life, right? Not knowing what you don't know.
Right, exactly. That's so true, and I feel for so many people that it's easy, I think, sometimes to believe the circumstances, to take it personally, especially in situations where people feel they have made the effort and it hasn't been successful. And so they begin to tell themselves the story of, well, this is how it's been, this is how it will always be. What advice would you have for them, John, where something you said was so key about how you said you felt like a visitor. You felt like, well, there's something I'm meant to learn, and you felt like that wasn't ever somewhere you were going to stay. What advice do you have for people who right now are feeling, I've made efforts to improve my life, I've made efforts to change things, and it just is, no matter what I do, it's just not working, and I keep having the same experiences? What advice would you have for them?
Well, that's a really good, very reflective question. And, I think the best example I can give is when I was in New York in a seminar. I went to a publicity summit where you go to New York and you have an opportunity to meet with literary agents, authors, and people like that when I was working on getting my book out. And it was a very interesting experience because it was expensive. It was a big commitment on my part. My wife was not that excited about it, but I asked her to come because I needed her support. And so what the opportunity was is to have 3.5 minutes to give a pitch, and I was able to line up about 75 to 80 pitches over a 3-day period. And so it was a pretty intense, and I remember that I went there the first day, and I gave my pitch, and it was everything that they told me to do, do it this way, be this way, and and make sure you're right on spot and all this. And so they gave me, so I developed a script, and they approved the script, Everything was set and ready to go. And so the first day I was there, one thing that I learned about literary agents and publishers more than anything else is that they have the capability to say no really well. And and I was, by the end of the day, I was red meat. I mean, out of the 25 pitches I had that day, I had one person that said, yeah, I think that's kind of cool, but everybody else said, no, we're not interested. In fact, one individual said, you know what, you might as well go home, because what you have here, nobody wants. I mean, it was crazy.
Wow.
And I'm going, no, this is not possible. And so I remember going back to our hotel room, talking with my wife about it, and we seriously thought about just giving up, going seeing some shows, or just going home. I mean, it was that bad. It was like, this is an immense failure. And then I remember reflecting on it in my hotel room, and I said, what is it that I have to change to make this work? And the thought came to me that I needed to tell my story. I thought, this is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever thought of, is telling my story, because I thought to myself, who would ever want to hear about what I had to say and about my background? And so I was so desperate, I thought, okay, I'm going to throw away my script, and I'm going to just basically talk about me and my story and see what happens. And so I went up to the first line, the first pitch that I had, and I basically said, hi, my name is John Mallett. My father walked out on our family when I was 8 years of age. We were evicted several times from our homes. We ended up in the projects that I grew up in on welfare. My mother contracted multiple sclerosis, or she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 12, and at 18 she died. And my book is about bringing stability. It's about homeownership, and it's about the importance of owning your home. And it's something that I would like to take out to the world. And I remember the first time that I did this, the gentleman's mouth was a little bit open, and after I got done with my pitch, he said, that's a really good story. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. And I was just amazed at that. I was just totally blown away, and I was screaming inside my head, this is not possible. It can't be this easy. And from then on, my closing rate was anywhere from 60 to 70%, and people were very interested in what I had to say, and it changed everything for me. It changed the way I wrote my book. I rewrote my book in the story format to where it talked about a lot of people who didn't think that they could qualify, but they qualified. It just opened up a whole avenue of how important my story was. And so in answer to your initial question, really what I've gained from that is number one, everybody has a story. And oftentimes we don't think that our story in our life is that important, about how we got to where we're at or what our challenges have been. And the truth is that your story is really powerful. That's how you connect on a deeper level to people. And that story can be so powerful. I can interview almost anybody, and I can pull their story out that they would be amazed at how awesome they are.
Wow, and it's so true, right? That it's kind of the same idea that when people have talents that they have very natural talent that they don't think anything of, and people are like, oh wow, you're such a talented artist or whatever it is, and they're just really, they don't necessarily feel that within themselves. So that's a really important lesson that you're sharing with us. A couple things. First, what I feel like really is significant, John, in what you just shared, is that you followed your intuition, that you had all this training and people saying this is how you're supposed to do it, and you went in and none of that was effective. And so then you said to yourself, well, what is going to be effective? And you followed your intuition. And I feel like in that regard, that's so important for all of us, because I think there's so many times where we defer what we may be feeling or the way we may be feeling led, and we defer to logic instead of following our instinct. And so I feel like that's a really important lesson in and of itself about being more trusting of what our inner knowing is telling us.
Oh yeah, and I think that's one of the key things of teaching ourselves to be present, because a lot of these opportunities come, and we just kind of brush them off as just, well, that's a bad idea, or that's too much, or I could never do that, or whatever it might be, and they don't stop and think about it. And for me especially, it's really something I've had to train myself, that when a thought comes into my mind, I need to give it some credit. I need to give it some validity and say, wait a minute, this might be the universe telling me that I need to pay attention here. And in that state, it's all there. I think that the universe has it all lined out. I really do. I really think that there's phenomenal opportunities for people to advance, to transform their lives. It's all there for them. It's just a matter of whether or not I take the time to listen and actually act on what it is that's coming into my body and into my mind.
Wow, that's so powerful what you just said about really being present. And what advice, John, would you have for people who are not having an easy time with that they tend to feel like that they can't trust their intuition, or especially people who are, one of the things where it seems like this has been a really, there have been a lot of massive changes for people this last year that were beyond their control. And they've been essentially forced to reevaluate their entire lives and recognizing stories they've been telling themselves about what is working and what isn't working, and what they really like and what they don't really like, and what they really desire and what they think is possible. And for some people, they're excited about the change, and for other people, they feel completely freaked out about making these major decisions that right now, I think for a lot of people, are requiring intuition, because the things that have been the logical applications have not worked. And so what advice do you have for people who right now are essentially freaking out, facing big changes, feeling like, well, how do I even access my intuition, let alone act on it?
Well, that's a great question, and I think what works for me and what has really been helpful is to really still my mind and focus on what it is that I really want. Why was I put here on this planet? What have I been meant to do? And I think that when you have a story, when you have your life, because your life is sacred, right? Your life is something that's really, really important. And how can you use your energy, your life force, to be able to help others? And as I find that when I begin to come out of myself and I begin to say, well, because the last thing you want to do is settle. The thing that I find that I do too much of is just settle and say, well, we'll just do it this way, or this is the way it's got to be, when that's just not the case. And there's too much opportunity out there. And that's why I'm using homeownership as part of that standard, as part of that foundation, as part of saying, yes, it is a possibility. And it does transform lives.
Wow. Well, let's definitely discuss that more, John, especially your background and your experience, I think, at a very young age taught you how much of a foundation, or not having a foundation, having a solid home environment can be. And so for people who may not have had that experience, right, who just are like, well, really, does it make that much of a difference? Because I think there's so many other things like our drive and determination and things. Maybe you could share more about your experience, or something in particular that really is an example of how either having a solid home or not having a solid home can affect life trajectory.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is really, I think that question is the heart of what we're really speaking about. when a lot of times when it comes to these myths about whether or not you can get a home. And, it's interesting because I grew up in a home where there was a foundation there, where it was an owned home versus going out into the projects where we're basically renting. And, it's really interesting because there was a study done that showed that children who grow up in homes that are rented have anywhere from an 8% to an 8 to 15%. They're less likely to actually own a home than those children who grew up in homes that were owned by their parents. And as I thought about that, I thought, well, what is the difference? I mean, we did a lot of research on that. My team, we did research on that. We thought, well, that's almost ridiculous to think about. Why would there be such a difference? Because that is a big difference in the number of people that think that they would not be able to buy a home, or that they don't buy a home because they grew up in a home that was rented. And so in doing that, the research really became very interesting when all of a sudden it was very intuitive. When we did a lot of research and interviewed people, and we found out that the individuals, when they're growing up in a rental property, especially as children, and they want to put a nail in the wall to hang a picture, and their parents say, hey, wait a minute, we got to be careful about doing that because we want to get our deposit back when we move. So right there, that's telling a child, you know what? We're not going to be here for very long. This is not a stable environment. And then, when the toilet breaks and the father or the mother says, hey, our toilet's broken, we've got to call the landlord, but the landlord's too cheap. He doesn't want to fix it. We have to do it ourselves. Or, the parent will tell the child, hey, we got to move because the rent has gone up. We can't afford it anymore. And I mean, the conversation of home ownership, or that sacred space where they live, is much different as someone renting versus a child that grows up in a home that's owned. In a home that's owned, parents are going to say, either the mother or father, whether it's they're single or married or partners, whatever it may be, they're going to say things like, well, let's paint your room. What color would you like it to be? Oh my gosh, right there, that's abundance, right? That's a feeling of freedom. That's a feeling of, man, this is going to be great. It's my room, my room. When they say the word my room, that means a lot to a child, versus a rental where they know it's not their room because the landlord is a jerk, or the landlord doesn't fix things, or, even if they have a good existence in the room, they still know that it's not really their room. And or when the parents say, yeah, we're going to fix up the yard, we're going to do this, all of a sudden life takes on an entirely different. We had an interview from a gentleman that was just a great guy. He was an older gentleman. His parents were sharecroppers in the South, and they were pretty poor. And then they were able to figure out a way to buy a home, and they bought this home. And he said, when my parents moved into a home that they own, their entire lives changed. They were different people. They were more confident. They were more sure of themselves. They knew that they were going to succeed. I mean, he said, and it changed my outlook on my life.
Wow.
And that's why when I started this journey of home ownership and, writing my book, and when I wrote it originally, it was horrible. It was like, who's going to want to read this? And then I started going to a deeper level of saying, you know what? Homeownership is sacred. It's a sacred trust. It's something that is transformative, that can really benefit people at a much deeper level than I think they give themselves credit for.
I think, too, it's one of those things that I think socially we're taught to just brush things off. Right. And so I think even when we do have those thoughts, right, that we're taught that it's all about mindset and drive and motivation, and and we don't recognize that as human beings, we're designed in a way that things affect us, right? It's like, for instance, if you go outside in springtime and you're in an area maybe where flowers are blooming, just seeing and smelling the flowers can uplift your entire day. Like, we're designed in a way that things do affect us, and we can use that to have that be a more positive experience. I think that's so true. Yeah. right? And I think I think the interesting thing is I think that when we're in an okay environment, even if it's not super positive, if it's manageable, we don't really think about it. And a lot of times we'll think it's something else, right? Maybe we're not happy with our career. Maybe we're not happy with our relationship. And we don't recognize sometimes just the living space can have an effect. Maybe there's not enough room for everybody in the home and there's a lot of fighting. And then when they're able to move into a bigger home and everybody has a little more space, they're like, wow, I actually like my family, or those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so I feel like
Exactly.
your awareness and your teaching around that, John, is so powerful. And one of the things you share that for me is really educational is the financial myths that are accepted as absolute truth, that people don't even make an effort to begin to even think that home ownership is possible for them. And so maybe you could please share with us if you have some of those, especially where you've had clients that they've repeatedly shared them with you. We would definitely welcome your helping educate us about what actually is true about the possibility of home ownership.
Yeah, and you know that happens all the time. I get calls. It's so interesting, Susan. I get calls where people will call and say, "Hey, we were out looking at a home over the weekend," and they always begin the discussion by saying, "I know we can't qualify." It's so ironic. They call me and say, "I know we can't qualify, but we saw this home that we liked over the weekend. We were just out kind of wasting time, and all of a sudden we found this house, and we go, man alive, if we could get in this thing, that would be fantastic." And, 9 times out of 10, within 25 to 30 minutes, they qualify for a home. And within 60 days, they're in a house. I mean, it is amazing the number of people. There are 33% of people who rent are mortgage ready. And in other words, it means that they can buy, and most of them don't know it. There was a survey done by Fannie Mae that showed that 45% of people who rented were surveyed said that you had to have 20% for a down payment. Well, that's crazy. If I want to buy a $300,000 home, that means I got to come up with $60,000 immediately. That myth, if I perceive that as to be truth, that would shut me down. I'd say there's no possible way. But you only need 3%. You only need $9,000. And so, what you're talking about here is so crucial. You're really getting at the deeper level of the behavior of what people are thinking.
Well, just an example you just gave, that seems to be accepted across the board. That for most people, I think if you ask them, is it true that to even qualify for a loan, you have to have minimum 20%? And I think most people, if you ask them, would say, yes, that's absolutely true. So is there anything else like that you can think of, John? And also, how do things like that, how do those myths become accepted as truth? Because I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, are just surprised by some of the things you're sharing to say, wait, that's not true?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times they think that they got to have a higher credit score, that their credit's not good enough. It's really interesting. I work with people that are worth millions of dollars, and when we're in the loan process, they're calling me every day to make sure that they're approved. They can pay cash for the house, but somehow when it comes to their credit, it's almost like they're applying for a loan. It's like you're opening up your journal. It's very personal. And so people tend to guard and say, well, I probably can't qualify because of my credit. Well, chances are pretty good your credit's probably good enough to be able to make it work. And the beautiful thing about the credit is that you can always make it better. It's something that you can change. And that's where the drive to buy comes in. As soon as the light goes on that you can buy, then all of a sudden you have what I call the drive to buy, and we've done a lot of research on that. And that's amazing, because when people get that idea, then all of a sudden they go, well, maybe my credit score is going to be okay, or we'll go into it. I'll put my foot in the water, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, but I'm going to go forward. And as soon as they start going forward and commit, then it's almost as if the universe conspires and says, okay, we're going to make this work. I mean, I've seen it where people come in and there was no way that they could qualify, not a chance. They didn't have a prayer. And yet they kept working at it. All of a sudden they got down payment funds, they got gifts, they got raises, they changed jobs, and it happened.
Wow.
And, and so there's so much, there's so many myths, and there is such a lack of understanding of what homeownership is all about, and even more important to some extent is the idea that they automatically say they can't qualify because of these myths, when the reality is that they can. And it goes back to your initial question is what do you do when, things are tough? And that's when you reach out and you begin to say, well, I've got to have the drive. I'm going to try this. I'm going to at least commit to it and see what happens.
Wow. Well, and I feel like, too, John, you have really pure intentions in terms of you understand what it means for people to own their home on a deeper level. That it's not just something superficial. You understand it on an energetic level and a psychological level and a spiritual level. And so I feel that you have the determination and just a very genuine spirit and intention of helping people as much as they possibly can have that experience. And I feel for some people, when they have gone for financing, they have not had that experience. That I've had people share that they said, isn't this person supposed to be helping me? And I feel like they're not working in my favor. And so what would you share for people who are or have had that experience, that it's been really off-putting, where maybe they've been told some of the things that you're saying, no, this absolutely is not true. Maybe they've actually even been told that by someone in financing. So what advice would you have for them, and how can they determine who is going to be someone like yourself who's going to be a genuine lender who really is working in their favor?
Right. Boy, that is really the crux of it. I tell you, man. I had we had, it really is. We had a seminar where you would come in and we would pre-qualify you on the spot. And I remember we had a couple come in, and they were very reserved, and come to find out later, his mother said, you got to go to this because you guys are renting. You need to think about buying a home. And before that time period, they'd been to a major bank, and this bank basically said, no, you can't qualify. The most you can qualify for is $400,000. And in Southern California, that wasn't enough in order to get them what they wanted. And so they come in, they were very reserved, and they told me what was going on, that they'd been turned down by the other bank. And within 20 minutes, after I pulled their credit, looked at their income, found out what it is that they make, because you got to qualify for the home, and what their down payment funds look like. Within 20 minutes, they were qualified to buy a home for $675,000. And they ended up in a home in 60 days that cost $675,000. It was a home with a yard, and it just transformed their lives. And I have found that right now, especially because it's so busy and there's so many deals and transactions going on, that lenders become very transaction-oriented. They become, they don't have a lot of feeling about what's happening. And when they see that there's going to be a loan that's going to be tough to get through, they're going to basically say, no, we're not really interested. You don't really qualify. And my belief is that our stand, my stand, and my grounding is saying, no, we're about igniting a home buying revolution here. Let's find out what you can do. And if you can't do it right now, what can you do in the future? What steps can you be doing right now to take so that you can eventually buy a home? And you can be able to have something that's sacred space.
Wow, that's a really important question you just shared about what steps can we take now to ensure that possibility for ourselves. And I think for people too in the process, John, I've had so many people share exactly what you did a bit ago about how people feel like it's almost opening up their journal, right? That when they go in for a loan, every time they turn around, they're being asked for more paperwork. And a lot of it is things that they wouldn't feel really comfortable sharing with anybody. Their bank accounts and checking and all that sort of thing. And for a lot of people, they said it just feels so invasive. And that's been part of the turnoff for them as well, in terms of maybe they had applied for something and it didn't go through, or even if it did, it was just such an extensive process. So what advice would you have for people? And also, what is the most important thing? What are the most important criteria that a lender is seeking, so people can know when they're providing the paperwork, well, exactly what is it that would be the most efficient way that they can get the lender that information to expedite the process?
Yeah. The main thing is to know what your gross income is, be able to have a pay stub available. If you work overtime, have an idea of because for overtime, lenders want to know on a 2-year average what your overtime has been, if it's above and beyond your wages or your hourly. So know your income. And then know your credit. Have one of them pull your credit, but only one of them. Don't everybody you talk to when you're shopping around and interviewing different lenders, and you are interviewing them. It's really important that you're the one that's interviewing, and have one of them pull your credit and and see what they can do to get you a copy of that credit report, so you can learn all about it. Really, and I'm telling you, even that I do this job, I even hate to look at my own credit, because I'm not sure what's going to be on there sometimes. And so you just got to bite the bullet and know your credit. If there's a collection, if there's a late payment, if there's something that came up, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Just understand what it is and know your credit score. If you know your credit score, then you can really get a good idea of exactly where you fit in the scheme of what you'll need to do. If the credit score is low, then we'll need to bring it up. If your credit score is good, then that's one thing you don't need to worry about. So it's know your income, know your credit score, know what your debts are, and then know how much your down payment's going to be. Is it going to be a gift? Is it savings? You may not have a dime right now, and that's okay. You say, well, in a year, what can I save, or what can I get in gift money, or my parents or family members or extended family members, and then begin to just kind of lay it on the table so that you really know what you have. And then when you lay it on the table, the lender is going to either say, hey, man, let's see what we can do to make this work for you, or they're going to say, no, you don't qualify. I mean, the people that say, no, you don't qualify, man, you need to just flee from them as fast as you can. But the people that say, well, here's what you can do, and here's what you can work towards.
Got it.
Right?
So you want somebody who's going to, even if they're saying, okay, we can't do this exactly immediately, you want somebody who's going to work with you to help keep that and make that a possibility in the future. And if somebody is not doing that, then maybe do not work with that person.
Right. And so, and you want to get with somebody that you trust, that you feel comfortable with, and that can help you along, so that you get a good idea of exactly where you're at. But sometimes lenders, they think of themselves as judges, which is just ridiculous. They're not judges at all, and they think that they have the keys to a person's life, and it's so ridiculous. Because when you put it on the table and say, well, what can I do? That's the first step, and a lot of people are really hesitant and reserved to do that. And once you get past that point, then you begin to think to yourself, okay, I can do this. Here's what I need to do to make this happen. And that's when your life becomes transformed. That's when you begin to think differently and saying, yeah, I think I can do this.
Wow. And I feel like that's the thread that's woven through this entire conversation, John, going back to your childhood, is having that belief somewhere in you of what is possible. And what you shared a bit ago about not settling. What advice do you have for people that don't feel that maybe they look at their childhood circumstances and they say, well, this is all my parents were able to achieve, and I don't even feel that I'm as capable and intelligent as they are, and so this is all that my life is going to be. Or where they feel like, well, there's other people out there who don't even have what I have in terms of skills and talents and things, and they're able to make a go of it, and I'm not. That maybe they're in a very defeated mindset. What can they do to start to shift their thoughts and their circumstances?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was growing up in the projects, there was low expectations for me. Most people didn't really think that I would be able to amount to much of anything. I mean, there was more of a feeling that said, you know, yeah, you can do things, but you can only do so much. I mean, it was like, you know, you can't get into school. You're not going to be able to college, so you need to do this kind of work. I mean, you know, people were they were looking at me and looking at my circumstances and saying, well, this is the mold that you are. This is where you fit. This is what you're probably going to end up being. And I just decided I'm not going to listen to that. I decided, you know, there's something more out there for me. And for people to tell me that, it's not right for me to listen to it. And so a lot of it had to do with environment. That's why who you hang with is so critical. And hanging with the right people, and unfortunately in the projects, that's not always the best environment. And so it's imperative to find people that you want to think like, that you want to become, because those are the people that can help raise you. And there's an interesting book, an essays written by a gentleman by the name of Fernando Flores. And one of the things that he talks about is to make a declaration, create something from nothing in your mind, and write it down. And the declaration is, I will buy a home, or I will go to school, or I will make this much income. You know, make a declaration and create something that does not currently exist, and then move forward with that declaration.
Wow. You know,
it sounds too easy, but it's real. And it sounds so simple, but that's what it is. It's simple. It doesn't take a rocket scientist.
Like so many things, right? I think that when it seems simple, we don't think that it will work. And so that's really important what you just shared. And what you were just saying, John, about choosing an empowering peer group brings to mind the idea that sometimes it doesn't even necessarily need to be somebody that we physically know. When you think about certain people who have really achieved in their lives, they talked about how that they had the opportunity growing up when CDs and cassette tapes were a thing, that they were able to listen to somebody like Tony Robbins or people along those lines, that it really fueled their... Tony Robbins tells that story about Jim Rohn, right? That it's like that was pivotal for his success, is that he just kept feeding his mind with the idea that you're more than your circumstance. This is possible for you. And I would imagine
that's where I
Go ahead.
That's where I learned about not to settle, was from Tony Robbins. Exactly right.
That makes sense then why you are where you are. And one of the things I think that's so important in what you're saying too, John, is that it's kind of like going to the gym, where it's not like you go one time and you're fit for life, that it's a repetitive process. And one of the things that I like about what you're sharing is that you have a very, how do I say this? You have a very solid foundation about you, where it's like you're standing in the possibility for people. So even if in this moment it's not manifesting as reality, you're still holding that sacred spiritual space for them of saying, live in this possibility, though, of making it a reality for yourself. Even if it's not happening now, you can do this. And I think that's so important because, like we were just discussing, a lot of people have not had that experience with their lenders, where they feel like if they've gotten a no, if they haven't gotten a yes, then it just means it's not a possibility. So they're not even going to go try again with another lender.
Right. I had a client, we call them family members, but come in, and she wanted to buy a home for $1 million. And out here, that's a nice home. It's a little bit above a starter home, but she found this home and it was perfect for him. She really wanted it. And on the outset, there was no possible way. And yet within 90 days, she was in. Wow. So, I mean, the possibilities are there. They really, really are. It's just a matter of how much energy and attention you give to it.
Like that attention and energy, that's so important. That's so important. What would you say, John, is one of the biggest misconceptions that you would most like people to know? If they're listening to this and they're saying, okay, I hear everything you're saying, I still don't feel like it's a possibility for me. What is maybe one of the biggest misconceptions that you'd like for people to understand the truth?
I would say is to go for it, is to not let the myths impede you. I mean, whether you're renting right now and you're thinking about wanting to buy a home, or have a home that you own and you're not really happy with it, the space isn't quite right. I had a client a good friend who the space wasn't right for her. She bought a home that had a larger kitchen, and now her life has totally changed. Families in the kitchen. She's cooking more. There's more communication. I mean, their life is transformed, and she already had a home. So it really has a lot to do with, are you in a space that's sacred for you? Is it something where you can move your life forward?
Wow.
And not to denigrate and not to limit yourself. That you can open up the possibilities. What you say, Susan, about the possibilities is really critical. Is to hold that space. There's a sacred space there that says, yes, that can happen. And I think that it can happen, and a lot of it has to do with your drive and what you pay attention to.
Wow.
That there's possibilities that can,
A lot of it, I think, too, originates in self-esteem, right? Is this idea of, or I guess self-worth even would be an even better definition. And so where can people start if right now in this moment they're saying, well, I like everything that you're saying and that's great, and there's part of me that believes it's a possibility, and then there's part of me that feels like I'm just not worthy of having a better life?
Mm-hmm. And I would say make a declaration. Make a declaration. Create something from nothing. Create that life, that feeling of what it is that you want. Create it. Just write it down. Say, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I want.
Wow, that's really powerful. That's really, really powerful. Well, John, for people who are maybe interested in working with you, whether it be from a financial standpoint or even from a coaching standpoint, can you share the best way that people can contact you and the services that you have to offer them?
Yeah. You go to johnwmallett.com, and my contact information is there. My phone number is there. You're welcome to call me. For your listeners today, I'll be glad to send them a free copy of my book, and see what we can do to help them on the road to home ownership. And even if they own a home, I'd love to talk to them. There may be some possibilities that would open up for them that they may not be aware of.
Okay. Question, John, as you're saying that, something comes to mind. That if someone is, and this is something that I had been told, so I don't even know if it's true or not true, that they talked about if you already own a home and you're in the process of, you have a loan for that home, that it can be particularly challenging if you want to move from that home into another home. What would be good for people to keep in mind if they already are in a situation that they have a home and that they have a loan for it and they're paying for that, and they're saying exactly what you just shared? It's not working. Maybe they have kids and the kids are getting bigger and they need a home that better supports the family or something like that. What would be helpful information for them keeping in mind about making that a possibility for themselves if they already own something?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. I think that's where the drive to change their life, to not settle and create a different environment. We had some friends of ours that they basically bought a home with a large enough lot that they could put in a pool because they wanted all their friends. They were, kids were becoming teenagers, and they wanted a space for their friends to come to, their home. And so basically they bought the backyard where they could put in a pool, and then they threw in the house. And so it's that idea of, or this other friend, she bought the kitchen and they threw in the house. And so it's really a desire that says, something, I think we can do this. I think we can make this even better than it is. And that's not to say that what they have right now is not great, because, there's a lot of gratitude for what we have right now that needs to be shared and be acknowledged. But when that something comes up in your mind and it says, hey, I need to pay attention to this, it might make a big difference in the quality of my children's lives, I think it's time that we go check this out. So a lot of times I will do things for others that I won't do for myself. And when it comes to my children, I will reach heights that I never thought I could do on my own.
Wow. So I feel like the key takeaway, and it's actually really educating me, this even beyond home ownership, is I think there's so many areas in our lives where we have a fixed concept of how we think it is, or how we think, or what we think is possible, or even if we're at a place where we feel, oh, I'm so grateful and I have this very lovely life, that there's always room for us saying, well, what else is possible? Because not only does that help us, a lot of times it puts us in a position to really support our loved ones. And so I feel like that's so important, what you're saying about just viewing life and being in the moment and believing in possibilities beyond what we think are available.
Right. And a good question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave? What is it? What's the legacy? What is it that you want to leave your family, leave your children?
That's really powerful. That's really, really powerful. John, as we conclude, do you have maybe a mantra or advice that a mentor gave you, or a particularly life-altering aha moment that you would be so kind sharing?
Yeah, I think that one space for me was when I was writing my book, and I remember finishing it. It was like 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I remember going back and reading it, and I just thought, this is the worst book I've ever read on mortgages. This is just horrible. Nobody's going to want to buy this. And then as I worked through it, I was going through some somatic training, and I was going through some, trying to kind of get out of my head and more into my body, to my whole being. And then the thought came to me that homeownership is a sacred trust. And Susan, as soon as that happened, as soon as I thought that homeownership is a sacred trust, it took on an entirely different, my existence changed about my job. It changed about what homeownership is all about. It changed everything for me. And it gave me a much deeper level and understanding that homeownership is something sacred, that not so much in the religious text, but it's sacred. It's that space. It's that place where you live and breathe and have your relationships. It's all of those things. It's where your children take their first steps. It's where your teenager goes out on a prom date for the first time. It's that environment. And that is a sacred space, and that your life is sacred. And that would be the moment when I thought, yeah, this is something that's really important, that needs to be articulated, it needs to be taught, and it needs to be shared.
Wow. Really, really powerful, John. Really, really powerful. John, thank you so much for your courageous journey
so welcome, Susan.
in your own life, and just your willingness to share everything and help people feel empowered, and more than anything, being the advocate and reminding people that home ownership is sacred and offering people possibilities. So thank you so very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much. It's so great to be with you today.
Thank you. John, that feeling is definitely very mutual. Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for joining us here on YOUnique, Life Starring You. Remember, be kind, be love, be true, and be you.